That's the phone ringing at police headquarters in Charlotte at 7:22 in the morning. Charlotte is the capital of St. Thomas, one of the three U.S. Virgin Islands, and the date is March 2nd, 1988. I just observed a man on Vessup Bay Beach, the female caller says, hacking away at a body with a machete. Captain Raymond Hinman immediately dispatches police officers to the scene of the crime. And here's the scene of the crime. Photo of it. Vessup Bay Beach, a secluded beach on the easternmost tip of the island. I was living on the sister island of St. Croix, about 35 miles across the Caribbean. I was a little bit busy at the time. I was teaching algebra, geometry, and trigonometry at a private school 5 days a week. I was tending bar 7 nights a week. And in between teaching school and tending bar, and on weekends, I was covering local sports for the Virgin Islands Daily News. And believe it or not, I still squeezed in triathlon training and an active social life. Plus, I was taking a correspondence course by mail in my free time. Not much of an internet back then. A correspondence course about learning how to write. I had this crazy idea that I wanted to become a mystery writer, like Harold Robbins, Elmore Leonard, maybe even Edgar Allan Poe. Maybe I'd create the next Sherlock Holmes. Who knows? Write detective novels. I had one magazine story published so far, A Taste for Revenge. That's an interesting story about how that got published. I'll tell you some other time. Meanwhile, back on St. Thomas. When police responded to the scene of the crime, they found 2 bodies, a middle-aged white female and a young white male, both decapitated, both bodies mutilated. And oh yeah, the carcass of the woman's dog was also mutilated. This later would become identified as a voodoo slaughter. We didn't have streaming crime shows back then, but crime was a popular genre, with its vehicle being detective magazines. There were a bunch of detective magazines back then, with circulations of millions of copies every month. They were called pulp magazines, initially pulp fiction. If you're wondering where Quentin Tarantino got the title for his blockbuster movie, that's where it came from. And then the magazines morphed into pulp nonfiction, or true detective stories. At the top of the list were magazines like True Detective and Official Detective. They flourished from 1924 to 1995. So I sent a query letter with some photos. You have to understand, this exotic double homicide was front page stuff back in the islands. I sent the photos to the editor-in-chief of Official Detective in New York City, Rose Mandelsberg. And I followed that up a few days later with a phone call. Would you be interested in publishing this story? She was. And she talked me through what needed to be done. I did the research and I wrote the story. Of course, you have to wait for a positive adjudication. That means a guilty verdict. That story, when published, was called Horror in Paradise, Virgin Islands Voodoo Slaughter. Official Detective published this story in its August 1991 issue. And I used the pen name Stephen Barry because I wanted to keep it a secret from the students, the teachers, and the administrators. So what I did was I just flip-flopped my first name, my middle name, Stephen Barry. I went on to write 100 or so true murder stories for the detective magazines from coast to coast and in the Caribbean. So now I'm going back to those roots. The way I see it, I'm going to create my own detective magazine, and I'm going to have a cover something like this, and I'll recreate those true murder stories, plus some classic killers and serial killers that I didn't cover. I'm shooting for one story every week. Voodoo Slaughter was my first true crime story back then. So it's going to be my first story now. And I'm going to aim for, I'm not sure, either Mondays or Fridays. The stories will be about 3,000 words each. They'll be hard-hitting, quick reads. And the first story, Voodoo Slaughter, should be ready next week sometime. I'll publish the stories on Kindle at Amazon for, say, $2.99. But I'll offer a PDF copy for your computer, laptop, or phone to members of a fan group that I create, and I'll offer those stories for 99 cents each. Now, I have to figure out the mechanics and technology of the setup and distribution, and I'll be looking for input and feedback from you folks when the stories come out. So, that's it for now. Thanks for indulging me. Until next time. See you.